Stathopoulos and Josh Phegan come together in an incredible podcast, Grow, Scale, Master.
An energetic approach to drive progress, master skills, build strengths and put the strategy back into rapid business and personal success.
Backed by real-world experience in rapid scaling to playing the long-term game of business, it's the story of all the lessons learned on the journey to mastery.
Be inspired, renew your energy and chase the future with Grow, Scale, Master.
Con, one of the most important conversations inside of any business is to really think about like what your secret sauce is. Like what's the thing that you know that if you do this, then it absolutely works every single time. Why do you reckon that, people have got to really zoom in on finding out what actually makes them great and doubling down on that?
I think it's pretty simple, Josh. I think if you can find out what your secret sauce is, whether it's experience, whether it's speed to market, whatever it is, you can amplify that and then actually work out why people want to use you to list and sell or manage their properties, or why people want to join you. More importantly, you also work out where the gaps are, or why people don't want to work with you, or people don't want to join you, why people leave you.
And this is kind of an interesting conversation. Like you might have a look at it, like there might be 20, 30, 40 agents in any individual market that are trying to become, the number one or the person that more consumers use more than ever. And the interesting conversation is that like, what is it about like a few that absolutely make it through versus others that, continually stay at less than 5% market share.
Yep.
And the foundational idea really has got to come down is that like literally the best become absolutely obsessed about like really understanding about what they do, when they do it, why they actually do it.
Yep.
And, one of the things that you and I have broken down a lot about, how does a business generate its leads? What do you do to actually win? Then how do you actually go to sell the thing?
Yeah.
It's really important to get that formula right so then it's actually highly scalable with the other people that are working inside of your organization, right?
Absolutely critical.
And when you think about like obsession, like give me an example of why you think people are obsession. Like this is not just OCD of getting the brochures right.
Well, we are a real estate, so that does happen.
Yeah.
Mate, I think obsession is a word that gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
I think I'd rather call it focused.
Yeah, sure.
These guys and girls, I should say, are completely focused on the outcome that they're trying to drive.
Yeah, sure.
So, case in point, we've got an agent that is in our business, that's been around for a long time, that makes lots of calls, isn't getting momentum or traction.
Yeah.
So rather than focusing or becoming obsessed with the outcome, become obsessed with the process of how you generate leads and why someone would want a market appraisal or why someone would want to, consider us to list their property. So I think the obsession is more a focal point. They have a goal, whether it's market share, whether it's financial, whether it's, personal, and they just stick in their lane and they get the job done.
And I think the most important part here too is that like literally when you talk about obsession, it's about how do I become the best at what I go to do in the world, right?
That's exactly right.
And I've never been driven about like who's my competitor or what does it look like. In fact, we had a really simple foundational idea inside of the business, like never ever bring up or talk about competitors, just focus on what we're actually doing for our customers.
They don't care about you,
yes.
So why should we care about what they're doing,
And
right?
then the old school lesson that I'd learned too is that ultimately they don't pay the invoice.
Yes.
So why are you worried about the people that don't pay the invoice?
Yes.
Now, there is a difference between focus and awareness. You need to have awareness about what's actually going on, but you need to have focus about what it is that you actually do.
Spot on, agree.
And this really gets me to think about like the three different types of customers. And not a lot of people actually really think this way, but believe it or not, there are a group of people that are absolutely obsessed in being your customer. They love it. They are in a position that they're all over the brand. They know
Raving fans,
everything you do.
champion of the agent.
Yeah, and they use you multiple times. They send you lots of referrals and without financial incentive to do so. And then believe it or not, and this is hard for some people to believe, but there are actually people that are clearly your competitors' customers.
Yes.
And they're just as in love with that competitor.
Yes.
And wouldn't even think of leaving them to come to you.
Yes.
Now, there is also a third type of customer, which are people that are not yet consumers.
Yep.
So they've not yet needed the service that we go to provide. But when they do, they've got a ton of preferences and biases that they've already obtained. How did those non-consumers develop their preferences and biases before they even got into a transaction?
Josh. It's experience. So think about where we meet most of our clients. It's at an open home.
Yeah.
Right?
Signboards up.
Signboards are.
Brochures applied.
Spot on. It's the way that someone's greeting them. It's the questions that we ask. It's not, the robotic nature of, name, number, check-in. They're not inmates.
Yeah.
So I think consumers that are not yet customers are making decisions, micro decisions that they don't even know that they're making. Where do they align themselves to in a particular brand? particular person, the experience that we're provided, the results that we drive, and what does it look and feel and smell like? Does that make sense?
Of course, like I'm going to say at the end of the day, they're having experiences with you before they have an experience. So if they're not yet on open, they might be on a portal. If they're not yet on a portal,
spot on,
then they might actually be at that year 6, school graduation where you're giving out an award on behalf of your brand and giving some cash to the school library, right?
Well, I'll give you a really good example. I inquired on a commercial property, and the response that I had all my name, my number, email, everything was there.
Yeah.
I just got a response 6
Yes.
M.
Yes.
That blows my mind.
Yes.
When someone has given you all their data and said, could you please tell me what this is worth?
Yes.
No questions. Why? Are you an investor? This, that, whatever it might be. So I think all of those decisions are being made from the moment someone wants to engage on their terms with us.
And so this is the appropriate nature of actually knowing how to follow up and how to follow through. But I was thinking about that, and I'm not sure why it's not big, but we were really big when I first started about wearing a name badge. And everywhere that you went, whether or not you're getting a coffee, you're getting a sandwich, you're getting lunch, but whenever you were in work mode, you wore your name badge, not just on Saturdays. But I tell you what it actually did for brand recognition and for people knowing who you were, and the number of people that would wave you and stop you in the street and have a conversation about something real estate was absolutely phenomenal.
We still do it.
Yeah.
We still do it. Every new starter gets a name badge, and I'd say, 7 or 8 out of 10 of our agents on a Saturday at an open home or an auction are always with their name badge on.
Why do you think it's not mainstream Monday to Friday?
I think it's just probably not part of a system that people are built in.
And this is kind of an interesting conversation, like how do you get known before you get known?
Yeah.
And I always just think about this as like literally, if you're lovely to people, like, and you go to the dry cleaner and you drop off your dry cleaning and you're dropping off your kids at school or you're getting the tyres redone on your car, like every single one of those people is absolutely the capacity to be able to refer you, right?
100%.
So one of the things that one of our customers did, which was a really interesting insight, is that they held a focus group where they were literally 35-minute sessions. And they brought in 5 existing customers. They brought in 5 competitors' customers. And they brought in 5 non-consumers.
Right.
And I asked them to say, hey, can you tell us, what are your experiences? What are your expectations? What do you know about our brand? What don't you know? What are some of the things that literally...
research.
Yeah, but what are some of the things as the reasons why you didn't consider us? Like tell us a bit more about that. And what would that have been like? And it was really interesting to kind of learn that literally what they had not thought about is how consumers are actually doing their research well before they get there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I bought a watch when I was first doing quite well in the training space, and I never understood where I developed the notion of that brand. And then I've been reading a magazine for years, and when I opened that magazine, there was the ad for that watch.
Right.
So I'd obviously been seeing it subconsciously for a long period of time before you actually come to making that consumer decision process.
Yeah.
And this is about like that real idea is about like find out why, like directly after the listing presentation within 36 or 48 hours.
Why they chose us.
And exactly the same inside of property management. Like why did the landlord actually make the decision to come across to you? And how many of those landlords are in a position that ultimately they are entering with new supply versus how many are a takeover because they're actually just unhappy with their previous level of customer experience elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's scaringly simple. Our sales managers, within 24 hours of a listing coming through, will contact the vendor, but we don't ask why they chose us. So there's a new question that we'll put into our process now that we follow that up. So I like that. That's gold. Same thing with the management. I think the whole idea about this though is if you've got a really good plan that you stick to, you execute daily, you turn up with the right energy and level of enthusiasm, you're focused on major milestones, not minor outcomes, i.e. I made the calls today, I didn't get the results, today's a bad day. No, it's not. How many people did you progress? How many conversations did you have that could be able to be moved forward? How many people did you touch in a positive way? That's a win, right?
I think the big conversation here is that, like, what you're really talking about is about, like, the development of what we're going to call relationships.
Exactly.
And I reckon that, like, relationships are completely underrated.
100% agree.
And the reality of it is that literally relationships are really the key to renewal.
Yeah.
Have you got some people that you hang out with that just massively make you feel more energetic, more driven, more positive, more visionary about your life?
No one. Mate, you do, and others. But yeah, absolutely. Relationship. Look, I think the key to this is it's not about the transaction.
Yes.
If we keep, you need to have the transactional skills to be able to prospect, list, negotiate and sell.
Sure.
It is about the relationship, because even when things don't go to plan, It's about the relationship you've built with that buyer or seller or landlord or tenant,
Yes.
or the person internally, where you can have real conversations.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing about relationships, right?
So the thing that I always look at is I say, okay, relevant, frequent, and consistent. So the easiest way to build a relationship with someone is make sure that you're relevant to them and their situation. Make sure that that relevancy then drives the frequency of the communication, and then be consistent around what it is that you do as a person.
Perfect.
Now, if I think about that, it's like when behaviours are inconsistent, that's when all of a sudden someone develops a reputation.
Yep.
Or when they're overbearingly frequent but not relevant, that's when it's like kind of stalkerish.
Yes.
When you're in a position that you don't know how to be relevant, then you're too afraid to approach.
Yeah.
And so this is an interesting thing. It's like, one of the things that you said to me, we had a dinner the other night, and he said, the interesting thing is that first of all, you do business with Josh, and then later on you become a best friend.
Yes.
And it's kind of like a bizarre thing, is that like literally kind of like testing to make sure that you're capable, you're going to do things and run with it. And Adam Grant actually wrote a book on this, which was about give and take. And he said, sometimes in life you're a giver.
Yes.
So you're naturally like giving to people all the time. Sometimes you're actually a taker.
Yes.
So all you do in a relationship is that you take. Now, you would think that literally takers are the ones that destroy relationships, but in effect, sometimes givers are in a position that they feel really disempowered because they give so much, but they don't see anything being done with it.
Yes.
Now it's not giving with the expectation of return.
I get what you're saying.
But if you said to me, Josh, I need some advice on how do I do this, and I say, do that, but then you just don't do anything about it, and you come back 6 months later and you're still complaining about the same thing. Versus if I said, hey, Con, do this, and then you went and did it, and then you got wild success, and then you came back and said, hey, mate, thanks for that, because it made a big difference on that.
Yes.
And that's when it actually becomes really fulfilling.
Yeah.
So I think it's about being conscious, because you can spot a mile away if someone's only interested in a relationship because they're looking to take from the relationship.
Correct.
And you can also spot a mile away someone that keeps on giving without having maybe that EQ or that IQ to know that what they're giving is actually not being received.
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point. So how do you make sure that you identify that?
I think that's ultimately how you work out what your secret sauce is. You work out, when you give advice and when you don't.
Yeah.
And ultimately when
and
you
to who?
And to who? Because if you worked out that they go and do something with it,
Yeah.
then it's incredibly richly rewarding.
Yeah,
and I think that the whole idea is that if you want to amplify the quality of your life, then amplify the quality of the relationships.
100% agree.
So if you got 4 or 5 really cool key relationships that are around you, some might be work, some might be sport, some might be family, some might be individual, whatever those things are, you need to make sure that you're spending the time to nurture and to grow those relationships. And I'm reminded of this where I saw a business guy that was really, really successful in the formative parts of his career. And he was very, very relationship driven. Right. And then all of a sudden you go to the second half of his career and he's become almost despondent. He doesn't really connect in terms of relationships, doesn't pick up the phone, doesn't build those relationships anymore. And you can see the early demise of the business quite quickly.
Yes.
Because those relationships are not being amplified.
Yeah, gotcha.
So I think it's a really important thing that literally once in, all in, and relationships are a really big part around what it is that you do.
Totally agree.
Experiences that rapidly shaped you.
One of the best things that someone can ever do for you, and I'm very, very lucky to have Nick Dowling, the chairman of Jealous Craig, as a mentor.
Gentleman.
Yeah, and Nick was in his position that he, took me out for a lunch. This is probably going back 10 years ago, and he said to me, Josh, I'm going to tell you what actually makes you great. And it's quite rare that because no one really does that, if that makes sense. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, that you're prepared to ask people questions that other people wouldn't ask. And I'm not sure where that actually came from, but we had a guy by the name of Stuart Levine, come and speak for us at Listen on Negotiate one year, and he wrote the book called Cut to the Chase. He was a fascinating guy, and I remember buying that book and I became obsessed by it. I read it from the front page to the back page, and I make every staff member read it inside of an organisation. And the interesting thing that literally happened is that I thought, this guy's so good, I'm just going to pick up the phone and ring him. So I rang up Stuart. I was like, oh, hey man, I'd love you to come out and speak for us in Australia. And he was like, what he sort of said to me, kind of brash American tone at the time, is like, what makes you think you've got the right just to pick up the phone and to ring me? And I said to him, well, I didn't know that I actually couldn't.
Yeah.
And so from that point of view, I'm just going to go and actually just call and just see what you've actually got to say.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, no one's ever asked me to come and speak in Australia. I'm like, well, will you? And he's like, well, yeah.
Sure.
And then, once I'd learned that skill, I was like, okay, great, I'm going to go and do this again. And I did it with Dr. Edward Hallowell, the preeminent researcher on ADHD. He came and did an event with us in Seattle, and Hillary Corner, he wrote One White Face, which was the story of her and Toyota and Kaizen business process improvement. She came to work with us in Tokyo. And the interesting thing was that literally, once I've learned that I was like, if you want to get someone, just pick up the phone and ask.
Well, I've got two things on that. The first one is, I completely agree. The first one is, I worked with one of Australia's best agents at Edgecliff back in the day, over 10 years ago now in the eastern suburbs, and they said, what makes this person brilliant? Well, he has the conversations and asks the questions that everyone's thinking about, but he actually verbalises them.
Yes.
So, and I think that's a critical, skill that you need to be able to get to the source of truth. Or just pick up the phone. In this industry, anyone can pick up the phone and speak to anyone, and 9 out of 10 times, someone's going to be more than happy to share IP, time, experience, etc. So I love that.
Like even for example, if you know the wealthiest family in your area and you manage to meet them, you say, hey, look, I know you've probably already got your existing loyalties in play.
Yeah.
But if ever you needed a backup real estate agent, I'd be thrilled to do it for you.
It's exactly the same thing when it's prospecting for talent. One idea that's or experience that's rapidly shaping me at the moment, Josh, is what are we saying no to when we say yes to something?
Yes.
So, for example, we've got a situation where we've got an agent that wants to come on board in a very high volume market. We can say yes to that person, which is absolutely an option, and we'll probably do that. But one of the things I've been questioning my team is every time we say yes to something, what are we actually saying no to?
Yeah.
And I think it's a really important kind of veil or screen that we need to put through our decision making and thought processes before we just go and say, let's get that new piece of tech, or let's put that person on. What are we actually saying no to when we say yes?
Something that's changing your view.
Con, there's this real idea about like systems for success, and I was really lucky, and I found a book at the time called Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Yep.
And I remember buying that book and reading it, and I really feel sorry for my mates at the time, and because one of my best mates was Tim, and I was like, man, we're going to go catch up for a coffee, and we went out at like 7 o'clock at night, and I reckon I literally taught him the whole book over the course of that coffee over the next hour, and he probably went home and go, that guy's mad. But I remember that as being like a foundational book that fundamentally taught me a ton of things.
Yes.
So it taught about like context, for example. So where are you right now and what can you do? So if you're in a car, you probably can't write out a contract.
Correct.
If you're at your computer, you could definitely write out a contract. You can send an email when you're, with a device, but if you're without a device, then you're probably going to need a notepad and a pen. So like it was just this, and if something could be done in less than 2 minutes, then do it.
Yeah.
And so like literally when you see these sorts of like little things that actually come into your world, it rapidly changes how the brain thinks, and then you use that as a system or methodology on how you got to approach your life. So I'd say to you, the most important foundational idea is that ultimately the thing that can change your view the most is finding a system that's going to work for you and going all in on that.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing that's changing my view at the moment is and everyone's talking about it, AI, right?
Sure.
So I'm not so much talking about artificial intelligence and about how it's going to disrupt a model or whatever, because that's already happened.
Sure.
I'm talking about our ability to be able to work with the technology.
So with this new tool.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I think the agents and the agencies that can get involved and can be early adapters and adopters of the tech and use it in a way that's going to enable them to be more productive in other areas are going to win. I think the agents and the agencies that don't want to get involved because it's too hard, I think that they're at risk.
So put it to you this way, there's an interesting conversation. Is there a difference between being a way out there in front innovator versus being a fast follower on this stuff?
Absolutely there is. I agree. I think the fast follower versus the innovator, because it's changing so quickly, and it's going back to exactly what you're talking about with the system.
Yes.
So how do you build the system for rapid scale?
Yeah.
How do we take a property to market and get it sold within 5 or 6 days?
Yes.
Not because it's a fire sale.
Yeah.
But can we have better predictive analysis over buyers? Can we have better data management tools? Can we have whatever it might be? This is where I think that this stuff's going to come into play.
I think this is the big conversation about learning how to be alert and aware and then knowing when to execute.
Spot on.